let's quickly go across to Elizabeth Larousse. She is the president of E. Larousse Consulting and has been monitoring those developments very closely. Thanks for being here on Beyond World is One. Let me begin by asking you for your assessment of what these developments, these images, this case overall, and the way Donald Trump has handled it so far really mean for his 2024 presidential campaign.
A lot will be determined on what's going on with the criminal charges here. Of course, his arraignment will be closed door, so we don't have the privilege of being like a fly on the wall, you know, in the courtroom to find out what's happening. But after the arraignment, he probably will be released on his own recognizance and then go back to Florida. And then it's a question of, you know, if the charges stick, this is going to be an uphill battle for the DA in making these charges stick. But however, he has chosen to, the DA, you know, Bragg has chosen to go down this road. So I think he's going to stick with it and go, and we'll just see, you know, what happens with the charges regarding, you know, his Trump's political fortunes right now. This has helped him certainly further solidify his base. I think there's a lot that can happen between now and the primaries, you know, Republican primaries, and then, of course, the election in November of 2024. There's a lot that can happen domestically. There's a lot that can happen in foreign relations. There's a lot that can happen with the war in Ukraine, tensions with China, oil prices, inflation. And so the worse domestic situation in the United States, the better fortunes for Donald Trump in running in 24 against perhaps President Biden or whoever the Democratic nominee might be.
Interesting. Elizabeth, if you can just, for those who might not be aware of the intricate details of what we are seeing play out on our screen, just elaborate on the process and the protocol involved as far as the arraignment is concerned.
Well, the official process is the district attorney brings charges and then brings it to a panel, essentially a jury, which will determine if they will indict Donald J. Trump, which they did. And so then the Secret Service, which is personally responsible for his safety, then remanded him to the court where he was processed and would have been fingerprinted. Don't know if there was a mugshot. And then he's delivered to the courtroom, and then the doors are closed and he is arraigned, where he is read his charges, and then will be asked if he has legal counsel, which he does. And then after learning of the charges, because of course in the American legal system, you need to be told what charges you have. And at that point, the court can keep him and set like a bail, which would almost certainly be met, and then he would be released anyway. Or, you know, in the most dramatic sense, if we really want drama, they could probably take his passport and say you can't leave the country and perhaps detain him. But I think that, especially being he has, you know, Secret Service protection, that they will let him go on his own recognizance, and then he will fly back to Florida, to Mar-a-Lago, where the DA then will decide if he wants to continue to pursue criminal charges, which at this point really regard breaking campaign finance laws. And there's not a really good, right now, convincing argument, paper trail for that. This is something that usually is a misdemeanor that has been elevated to a felony in this case. And as a misdemeanor, usually there is a period of time, 2 to 5 years, under which then the charges expire. But in this case, it's been about 7 years. So it's an unusual case, definitely an uphill battle for the DA. And it's very, very interesting that he has chosen to pursue it.
Indeed. Elizabeth, stay on with us as we also get our viewers a better sense of what's really happening on the ground. Let's also get in our correspondent, Susan Teherani, on to the broadcast. She's with us over the phone line and has been tracking those developments very closely. Susan, First of all, tell our viewers about what's playing out outside the Manhattan courthouse. We believe the Trump supporters have been growing in numbers, and they are stationed at the park right across from the courthouse.
Yes, we do see really Trump supporters gathered in front of the courthouse since this morning, really. Despite the fact, however, that the president really called for mass protests, I'm standing inside this park. You see 150 very vibrant protesters with posters, placards, and American flags in hand. But it's not as big of a protest. What you see more of is really the media, national and international media, descending here in downtown Manhattan, which just shows where Donald Trump goes. The news and publicity follows him. While you do have his supporters outside here at this park, then you have counter protesters, if you may, those that don't support him and are sort of happy that he's in this courtroom, facing each other. Earlier in the day, there was some kind of skirmish between the two, very small. The police sort of broke it off, but since then, the two sides have been barricaded off from one another. On the one side of the park, you see those that are, protesting against this indictment and arraignment today, and those that are somewhat, for lack of a better word, celebrating it. And I talked to police officers and law enforcement, and they said the best way was to really just put a barricade between these two groups. And I think it's really a snapshot of perhaps where the country is right now regarding this unprecedented event that we're watching right now unfold, and how divided everyone is, and how much maybe people have already drawn their conclusion, despite the fact that we don't really know what the charges are. I know there have been reports that there's going to be some 30 charges, one of them felony, but as our guest really eloquently put it, it's just an uphill battle. It's being Frankenstein together, as far as we know, to try to make it a trace, and we'll see how far it goes.
Right. Susan, let's also talk about the statements that Donald Trump has been issuing in the build-up to this very moment. In fact, he has been, mentioning and talking about this entire case. In fact, before appearing in court to face the charges as well, he described the moment as being surreal. Tell us more about the way Donald Trump has really portrayed this entire matter.
Well, surreal really is the word, considering the fact that we've never seen a former president really go through something like this. And you can't blame Donald Trump, considering the fact that he went through 2 impeachments, and then there was that sort of Russia hoax that was labeled against him, and then one after the other, really allegations leveled against him that really turned out not to be true. So to say that he's been a target is really an underestimate right now at this point. And I think that it's not just him, but his supporters agree with that. But I do want to say in the short term, at least until now, Donald Trump, at least among his base, has benefited from this. Just the 3 or 4 days since the news of the indictment, Trump insiders have reported that he made up to $8 million he got from campaign donations. Now, whether or not this is short-term gains, ultimately will turn into long-term pains, we'll have to wait and see. But his popularity, at least among his base and the Republican Party, has really gone up because, for the most part, many believe that this is just very politically motivated, and it's just unfair towards the former president.
Right. Stay with me, Susan. Elizabeth, if I can get you in at this point, as Susan was just mentioning the ramifications of this entire case and the way Donald Trump has been reacting in the build-up to this very moment as well. What do you make of the fact that there has been a rise in the donations, in the fundraising as well that we have seen?
There are a lot of Americans who still support President Trump. There are people who believe that he won the 2020 election, and they see how he was brought up and on 2 impeachment, not just 1 but 2 impeachment charges, yet not convicted, and a lot of the charges that were leveled at him throughout his entire presidency, and so people are very angry with that treatment, and so they're going to donate money. There are other Republicans that are somewhat relieved that this might take him out of the running. A lot of people do not relish seeing another Trump-Biden race. And so it is questionable right now. A lot of people might support, Donald Trump next year. Again, it depends on what happens between now and really, like next summer, maybe September, which is still, quite a ways away, to see if that support, stays with him. In order to win in 2024, he not only needs to win Republicans, but also the independent voters. And I don't think there's a lot of Democrats who are going to vote for him. So will the Republicans stick by him, and will a lot of independents vote with him? And then, I suppose some Democrats that, just feel like Biden, did a poor job. And so his future is still very much in the air. But as a result of this, there are a lot of people that are supporting him and saying, this is just unfair. Let's support the guy.
Elizabeth, let's also talk about the way this coverage has really panned out in terms of the optics. Right at the beginning when I talked about what this really means for the 2024 presidential campaign, the kind of curiosity, the fact that this is an unprecedented case that we are looking at. What do you make of the way the entire coverage really has panned out, and from here onwards, how this has been one of the top global headlines that we are going to be seeing in time to come?
Well, 2 things. First, it does make the United States look like some of those other, less developed economies, less developed political systems, shall we say, where when the so-called ruling party is out of power, then the new party that comes in, the opposition, prosecutes and persecutes the president who just left. That happens in many, many countries. And so the United States looks pretty bad because it's pretty low to go after a politician that's, out of power. It's he's gone. We're done with that. Now we're going to go back and bring him up on charges. So that's one thing. That's the optics don't look good. It looks like the U.S. is stooping politically pretty low. The other optic that concerns me even more is that the United States is not hanging together, and that the U.S. society and U.S. politics are not hanging together. We are not united. We are not facing our adversaries with a united front. And you look at other countries that are able to get their populations to go along, whether it be through fair or unfair means, but those countries are moving forward, and they present a real challenge and a real threat to the United States. I used to be a professor, and in my international relations courses, I would compare and contrast current U.S. politics with those of other countries, for example, China, and say, look, China is moving forward. They're united, whether we like that unity or not. The United States is not. And this story doesn't end well. And so the U.S. has to get its political house in order. Otherwise, the story doesn't end well for the United States.
We are now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.